going to be the case. And none of that is recorded. Did we really not start the recording till now? Okay. Well, for those of you who are just joining the recording, Dole has announced that I am leaving the city of Fountain. For those of you who don't know who I am on the recording, my name is Brandy Williams. So thank you all again for all your support. It's been great working with you. As I said, we'll still be working together in one way, shape, or form, but thank you. I think this group is very special. It's kind of one of the best supportive groups in the region, that we all look out for each other and we all support each other. And I know that that's going to keep continuing going forward. So thank you. And I wanted to take this opportunity to announce Ben Sheets. He will be taking over these TAC meetings. Some of you may have seen him. He was the public works director for Woodland Park and came to these meetings for a little bit. And now he will be back representing the city of Fountain. Did you want to say anything?
Looking forward to working with y'all. When I worked for the city of Woodland Park, wasn't really as involved, and I plan on changing that. So I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you.
If I could, Brandy, I'd like to say thanks. When I first joined Manitou and first joined TAC, I noticed that there was some lady who had an unfinished wall background on these TAC meetings who seemed to really know what was going on. So after the first or second meeting, I said, hey, can I get your cell phone number? She's like, sure. So I called her and I was like, hey, what's it like to be a city engineer? And two, what do we do with these meetings? And so you've been a good role model and guidance for me in this. So I appreciate that.
Brandy, this is Victoria Chavez speaking. You know how much I have valued your companionship, your friendship, your work ethic, the collaboration that we've had together. And so I would like to move that we deny Brandy's retirement or
Can I get a second?
resignation, and we vote no.
You know, normally PPACG doesn't get to vote on these things, but we're going to break that rule and we vote no as well. So. And if I could just, as long as I've interrupted sort of the thought consciousness here, Brandy, you've been great to work with and very regional in your thinking. There's been lots of times, you know, I'll get a cell phone call from you and like, you know, we could probably do it this way and it probably would be acceptable to everybody. So the region has been a far better place and has functioned far better for your participation in all of this over the last, well, 4 years since I've been here, but even before that. So I personally hope that this is just, won't see you at the same place in the same time, but I'll see you around hopefully just as often, because you've been great and just a super person to work with. So thank you very much.
And Brandy, this is Brian. So I'm probably the only one who didn't know this. And had I known that, I would have come to this meeting in person. So I'm sorry about that, but
you know, you're not that far away, Brian. These meetings take a while.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But yeah, Brandy, you've been a great member of the TAC, and you know, your leadership when you were chair for 2 years was amazing. And you know, we dealt with some really challenging issues, and you led us strongly through that. And you will be missed. And yeah, hopefully I will see you in another capacity. But thanks for all you've done, and it's been great working with you. Good luck.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks everybody. And I think I have a standing invitation to lunch, so you may not see me every month, but at least every other month maybe. So thanks, guys, and keep up the good work. It's a very important part of this community, and I'm glad everybody takes it as seriously as they do, because we really do make big changes in the lives of bigger and smaller communities within the region. So thank you.
I do want to point out, Brandy, that next time we have a lunch, you'll have an expense account by then. So, all right. Thank you, everyone, for that. Okay. Any other public comments on items not on the agenda? Okay. I hope everyone's had a chance to review the meeting minutes from the June 16th meeting. If so, and they look good, if I could ask for a motion to get those approved.
Move approval. I don't know why it's just move approval. Doesn't sound right.
That was Brandy.
This is Brian. I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion for approval in a second. We'll skip the discussion. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. All right, meeting minutes are approved. Okay, John, Board of Directors report, please.
Yeah, so when the board met on July 13th, they had a couple of items that would be of interest to you here on the TAC. Under action items, they did the approval of tip amendment number 1, and they approved the release of the UPWP out for public comment. And so I think Danelle's already started that out there. And I think that is it. They did have a lengthy discussion on the stack update and some of the things that are going on with the EV charging, but that seemed to sort of continue, was a continuation of that stack meeting, and again, was information only.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Okay, on to our first action item. Jason, if you want to lead that one.
Great, thank you, Dole. I'm just gonna share my screen real quickly here. Is that showing up all right? There we go. Okay, thanks, Phil. All right, so this has been a long time in the making. Since 2019, we started talking about the Tri-County study, and we believe we're just wrapping it up. So I'm not going to belabor this because we did sort of an in-depth kind of a thing in April, just a couple months ago. So I just wanted to do a little bit of a wrap up, talk about where the Tri-County fits, exactly what it is we're asking you to recommend approving, just so everybody has a good idea of what it is they're asking us, we're signing off on. So a quick recap of where it fits and what it does. So that the Tri-County is meant to fill a gap in planning. We've got a TPR plan for the larger 5-county CDOT TPR area. That covers state facilities and routes. And then we've got an MPO long-range transportation plan and TIP, but so far there hasn't been any organized transportation plan or study for our 3-county council of governments area. So again, that's the gap that the Tri-County study is meant to address. And then I just wanted to briefly talk about how to differentiate the Tri-County study from our long-range transportation plan. So there are some similarities. It's multimodal, it's long range, it establishes a network, does some of the same things, but there's some critical ways that it's different. And so I just wanted to go through those real quick. First, it's voluntary. Tri-County study, it's not federally required like the long-range transportation plan is. It's the first of its kind for us and also for the state. I'm aware there's a couple of other regions already looking at emulating this. So we got there first on this one. And it doesn't recur, so it's not regular. It's a one-time deal. If we wanted to do something like this again, we'd have to go through finding the funding and seeing if everybody's interested in that whole game. It includes rural areas. It's not fiscally constrained, so we can talk about whatever projects and whatever monies we like. And this one I'll break down a little bit. It's outward facing. So the difference between the long range plan and the Tri-County here is that for our long range plan, we sort of get a fixed amount of funds that we're expecting that we then disaggregate within the region. So it becomes a little game of who's going to get what. And in a way, there's competition, winners and losers in a sense, even though we try to do a good job regional thinking. But the Tri-County is really aimed outward, is saying what monies that wouldn't have come to the region otherwise can we capture by identifying these projects and telling these stories. So it's pretty much overwhelmingly going to be money that wouldn't have been in the region otherwise. And it's not going to make any winners and losers. It actually helps develop the project concept. So for a long range plan, we go out to our member jurisdictions and say, give us your projects. The Tri-County includes a number of jurisdictions that may not have the capacity to do that on their own. So there's been a little bit of help there. It's not connected to the TIP or another dedicated funding mechanism. And the projects in the Tri-County probably need further study and vetting before they'd be ready to move forward. So they're not being put forward in the study as fully vetted and studied projects that are ready to move forward necessarily. And there's no project prioritization. So nobody's project is being prioritized over anybody else's. A couple of key deliverables, just a little refresher on that. So it creates a list of regionally supported projects that don't exist in other documents, like our plans or the TPR plan. It helps develop project concepts, like I said, for member governments that may not have the capacity to create a fully fleshed out project to meet a need that they're aware of. And just on a long range planning level, it helps us get to a better understanding of what are the needs and opportunities in the full 3-county region, which we've never really had a look at before. Just to run through process real quick, and it's going to be pretty short. I think we're already about halfway done. So this was the process for the study. So even though we started talking in May 2019, so due to factors beyond our control, we started last May 2021 when Felsberg, Holt, and Ulevig was hired and work began. That summer, stakeholder process and an extensive review of existing member plans were kicked off. In December, we had on-site stakeholder meetings, one in each county. So the El Paso County meeting was here. We also went out to the Teller County Sheriff's Office, had a stakeholder meeting there, and we went out to Fairplay for Park County. There were focus breakout groups that met early this year. Then in April, the phase 1 report, which was the list of all those projects, that was completed and circulated for comment. And everybody seemed fine with that. Phase 2 was completed last month, and that consisted of adding detail, fleshing out projects that we'd gotten from some of our members. And then the final draft has been completed now, and a 30-day public comment period was initiated last month, and we're actually still in that. We're just a few days from closing that public comment period. Comments are overwhelmingly good so far, and we haven't gotten any comments that any disagreeable comments that we can't work with in some way, or we can't make some accommodations. So far everybody's happy. Yeah, knock on wood. Previous actions with this group, just to capture the full history. So in October 19, there was an information item where we talked about project scoping, got some good feedback that's been helpful. It was voted into a TIP amendment in December. There was an information item that was a progress report for TAC in October 2021, and then just again a couple months ago in April 2022. So we're going fast because I think the group is fairly up to speed. This is just a slide of some previously reported stuff. I'm not going to go through it in any detail, but just as a refresher, we talked about the project approach. Most of this was in April, the extensive stakeholder process, deliverables, some of the more interesting findings from our extensive review of existing member plans, and then some of the key findings from the focus groups. And we can go back over that if anybody wants to. Just wanted to give a quick refresher that we've talked about some of those things. One question that I thought might come up is, where do the projects come from exactly? Mostly from the focus groups in the study, the county stakeholder meetings, and then current member approved plans like comprehensive plans, transportation plans. And just as an FYI, all of the projects have been reviewed by the member governments where they would exist or that would be affected by them. So no surprises for anybody there. These are just some example projects for anybody who hasn't had time to really go through the document. This is what you'd find in there. If you look at the long project table, there's the location of the projects, the source, where did they come from? There's a need statement and a description. And this is also the same material that we hope will be helpful for our member governments if they decide to go out for funding for these projects. So the information is here. They can say it's in a regionally supported approved document. So you can see here you've got one from each county, where they came from. There's trails, there's county roads. And that's really what we're looking at is county roads and other facilities that sort of fall through the cracks as far as other planning efforts. And then I thought I'd quickly go through in about 2 minutes an example planning process that shows how the document would be used. So just to show it's not going to be sitting on a shelf. So for example, there's a county that has a project on a rural county road. Okay. And maybe that's something like, and this is a true one, the project would help maintain access to a state park, but it's not eligible for TIP funds. It's not in a TPR plan. It's basically a county road where the county is stuck with maintenance for a lot of traffic that's going into a state park or a federal forest, something like that. The project gets added to the Tri-County study, but maybe it's not developed in enough detail for most grant applications. So the Tri-County study team assisted with developing the project itself to help get it ready for a typical grant application. The county uses the funding plan in the Tri-County study to pick out the best and most likely funding source. So how are they going to get it funded? And then finally, that county applies for a grant to fund the project. They use details from the study, like the need statement, description, cost estimate, to help complete the application. And then, the listing in the study itself is used to demonstrate regional support. So when they get to the box in an application that says, do you have regional support? Do you have partners? They can say yes. Quick note, and we're actually almost done already here. It's just significant that the Tri-County it's a study, not a plan. So just to give you a very precise idea of what we're seeking approval for and what it means, what we're asking you to recommend. So unlike the long-range transportation plan or any plan, approving the Tri-County study doesn't signify an intention to implement all these projects. We're not saying we as the region want to implement all these things and do all these things. It's kind of one step back from that. What it would mean is that it would just allow a member government to show regional support if it should decide to seek funding for the project and move forward. So just to give us a flavor of what we're doing and what we're not doing. And then, so the final draft report has been completed and we've had that, but one thing that we don't have in front of us yet that's still forthcoming is the funding plan. And that'll sort of be a grant index or database and a funding guide for member jurisdictions to use. Because we don't want to just say, here, let's develop these projects. Now, good luck out there. So it's sort of a guide that'll help guide them through the process of discovering what funding opportunities are available, what information is needed. And I think that's about it. Didn't want to belabor it since we went into more depth in April. So at this point, I'd take any questions that we might have and then request that you recommend approval. Any questions or comments?
Go ahead. Just process-wise, we usually have the public comment period over and then you bring what the comments were and our responses to them, and then we pass them. If there is anything significant that comes up, is your plan to bring this back to us next month with an addendum if required?
Yes, yeah, that would be the plan. And I acknowledge, yeah, what you're saying is true. So far, there hasn't been anything contentious. There haven't been any comment situations where we haven't been able to make an accommodation and get to the point where everybody says, thumbs up, we're happy.
Just a process question. So
Yeah,
if your plan
completely makes sense.
is to bring it back, if there is any other significant issues, I have no objections with going forward with the recommendation.
I would say then we could make it a recommendation contingent upon that. That would be perfectly fine, and say that we would do that if there's something significant that we can't get fully resolved before we ask for approval.
To your point, Victoria, I mean, even just the perception that the report was approved before the comment period was wrapped up, it comes across like, well, then why did you even have a comment period if you already had your report and you already had it approved? Even if there was, because that's all they would see. They would know that it was approved with this contingent statement.
Yeah.
My recommendation is that we maybe wait until that comment period is done.
Yeah, is there a rush? I'm trying to figure out why we're not waiting till the funding plan is in place so that we don't even have to have an addendum. But is there a reason that we're wanting this approved today and then therefore go to the August board meeting?
I wouldn't say there's a rush. And then to your point, Joel, I think maybe it's splitting hairs, but the actual approval, the board approval would not occur until all the comment period was done and all the comments had been processed and seen. But I suppose we are asking just for the recommendation before then. And we're a couple of days shy of the comment period being closed. I know you haven't seen the comments, so I can definitely see what you're saying. It's just a finer point that the actual approval wouldn't happen until the comment period was closed. And then we'd had some buffer time to review all the comments and include them in the study. So just throwing that out there, but I can see what you're saying.
And I'm just saying from a perception, the public is like, why is this approved already? I asked for my street to be whatever, and you've already approved it. So, and then you have to explain it just seems to be, we got to be careful of the public perception, I think.
And did you present any comments? Like in the presentation, like we don't really have a feel for what the comments were.
No,
So are
haven't been
we,
presented. Yeah.
right, so are we gonna get that at the next meeting? I'm with Dole, I'm trying to figure out why it's kind of out of order. Because this would be the comment period closed. We get to see what the comments were. So we have a feel of what the public is or isn't looking for, and then we would approve it. But it just seems like we're getting the report, and I know you've worked hard on this, but
Sure.
we don't really know what the comments were that may or may not have come from our region, people we know, people we talk to, but it doesn't seem like we're ever going to get presented those comments.
I understand your concern. Yeah. And I mean, if it's the will of the TAC, then certainly we have enough time in our contract and our funding deadlines that we can accommodate that, if that's more comfortable.
Yeah, I think that'd be more of a thorough presentation. Anybody else comments?
Do you want a motion for a table? I'd like to move that we table this item until next month when we can see the full breadth of public comments and how they're incorporated, and then seek approval at that time.
This is Brandy Williams. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? All those in favor of Victoria's motion, please say aye.
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 Brian, I was waiting to see if,
I said aye.
okay. Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, Jason, that motion passes.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next month. Sure. Yeah, makes sense to me.
All right, continuing on the agenda. Gotta get back. Okay, Danelle, looks like you're going to present on our 2023-2027 TIP amendment.
Yes. I just need to get back to that page.
I have a hard time.
So the TIP amendment number 2 includes one addition of a project requested by CDOT. That's the State Highway 111 Nelson Boulevard to I-25 improvement project, which is $350,000 for a design phase. It also includes a change to the project description of a current TIP project sponsored by Woodland Park, which is the State Highway 67 widening phase 1. And the background on that project description change is that CDOT and Woodland Park had plans to complete very similar projects. So we had a coordination meeting and and Woodland Park made a request to change the extent of that project. And then in addition, this TIP amendment has funding for 11 projects that went through the MMOF selection process. And those are also included in this amendment here. I can go through them or answer any other questions that you might have.
Do you have a list of those projects you can show?
Yes.
And more specifically, is everything worked out between MMT and Fountain for the Fort Carson? I just wanted to know if we can avoid anything now that would come up at the board meeting.
That is a very loaded question.
Sorry.
As of probably an hour ago, the answer is no.
Okay.
So, Brian, I don't even know how to approach that, but all I can say is no. And it sounds like Fort Carson is still talking to both entities.
Then, and again, I would recommend then if, since this is a project on there, that MMT make sure that you have all of the right people at the board meeting, because I can guess that there's a certain board member that is going to take issue with that project on the list. I could be wrong, but I would like everyone to be prepared and not blindsided by that.
Thank you for bringing that up, John.
Brian?
Yep. Yeah, I agree with Brandy. I mean, it sounds like Fort Carson is, entertaining both Fountain and us and trying to see basically what the best deal that they can get is. And so, yeah, I mean, I recommend keeping this on because if we're the ones doing it, we're certainly going to need those funds to help start it. But yeah, I'll be at the board meeting and really can't wait for that discussion.
And I think since City of Colorado Springs has gone through the effort to put it there, I think if we move it forward, we know it's there. And then some sort of arm wrestling behind the scenes with Fort Carson can take place, whether it stays City of Colorado Springs or Fountain, but at least it's moving forward. At least it's there, and at least it's essentially, I don't want to use the term earmarked, but intended to serve this purpose. And I think only time's going to tell, Brian, and that's about where we're at today.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Mr. Chair, I have some other comments on this item. I want to make sure that we have this updated appropriately for the two Colorado Springs items and the one Mountain Metro item that's for the 2 battery electric buses. The sponsor is actually now PPRTA on both cases. And I notice on the individual project sheets, I think you're trying to get to that point, although it still says City of Colorado Springs as the sponsor on them. And then on the Mountain Metro item, it does not mention PPRTA in any fashion, and PPRTA is the awardee for those items. Yes. So both of those will need to be correct, or all 3 of those items will need to be corrected.
Okay, so Danelle, do we need to have this? Is there a timely to have these things approved? Or do we need to do a motion to get them approved but amended as Gail proposed? Well, because it's all in one.
Right, we're looking for a motion to approve with the sponsors updated as requested by the City of Colorado Springs.
Okay.
That is correct. So Gail Sturdivant, City of Colorado Springs, I move to approve the fiscal year 23-27 tip amendment number 2 with the amendments that the sponsor for the 2 items for Colorado Springs and the 1 item for Mountain Metro labeled the 2 battery electric buses for Route 3 be amended to PPRTA being the sponsor.
This is Brian. I'll second that.
Let Brian have it.
Thank you, Gail and Brian. Okay, did you get that, Danelle?
Yes.
We have a question? Yes, Wendy.
No, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, but I just want to know that the applications were received that way.
The applications were received with the City of Colorado Springs. And then at the last PPRTA meeting, there was action to move them over, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we offered to update the sponsor name on the applications, but told we could do it administratively at this
I just
time.
think you need to have something attached to the application in your permanent file that says what transpired. And I will tell you this, from Region 2's perspective, in doing partner projects where we've had contracts with PPRTA, it's been a pretty difficult set of circumstances to work with. And to have DTR having to do this, this could be a long drawn out process. I'm just saying, because they don't have staff. Again, they have quite a plethora of vacancies up there. So just keep that in mind, that it could become a delay from that perspective.
And Wendy, I will point out that the city of Colorado Springs will be providing the staff time on our side on behalf of PPRTA to assist them with the activities that we
It's
normally would
just
as a local
the
agency.
Contracting process, it's the logistics of it, because it won't go through our region. They go through Denver. Those buses.
Wendy, I can't hear you at all on Zoom here.
Sorry, I just think that the contracting for the buses will go through DTR, Brian. And I think that that might take some extra time because it's PPRTA and not necessarily the region or through the normal process. Anytime we've dealt with PPRTA as a partner, it's taken us a while to be able to get things accomplished. That's all I'm just giving you forewarning.
Yeah, and I think that is very valuable.
Were you able to hear me now?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you hear that,
Yeah.
Brian?
Yep,
Okay.
I heard you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that that's very valuable. And I think much like DTR, PPRTA is in a moment of transition with Bev leaving and having somebody new come on. So I think literally the city of Colorado Springs is going to do all of the heavy lifting with everything other than showing up and having Andy sign something and then moving on. So there should not be any delay from the PPRTA aspect. Again, it's not like something is going to sit on now Lisa, who's taking over for Bev's desk until they get to it. City of Colorado Springs is going to take care of that and then have Andy sign on behalf of the PPRTA, if I understand correctly.
Well, and to clarify, the state's MMOF money isn't changing. It's still the same amount on the same project. It's just that the
It's
local
ju-
match
just the
goes
sponsor.
from, yeah, okay.
It's not the local match. The
Just the sponsor
sponsor is
changes.
changing from City and Mountain Metro to PPRTA. And PPRTA, or the city, like you will still have the same points of contact that are on the applications. In name, it will be awarded to Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority.
And then since RTA did do a board, there is documentation that that was approved.
Yeah, so it was a board. I have a summary memo that, and it has a policy that was put in place by
Okay.
PPRTA to accept this. I can provide that memorandum to PPACG to have as that item, and it would be documented in the board minutes from July 13th that that was approved by the board unanimously.
Then I would think that with the amended per the motion on the table that was seconded, I think we should be good to go still. Okay, any other questions on the motion and the second that's on the table? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, the motion that Gail made with the revised language passes unanimously. Thank you.
Side comment. Victoria, you might want to warn them that this may be happening more and more in the future, since we do have this board policy now, and any of those state funds that come through where we are Tabor limited, this gives us a way to apply for those. So it will undoubtedly be happening more in the future. So you might want to just give them a heads up.
I will point out, though, it probably won't happen from anyone else but the city, though, into 2025. So hopefully we can work out if there's any modifications to the process with the city and PPRTA staff.
John, do we want to go grab Laura? Is she still at the front desk? Oh, she's behind the column. I can't see.
Yeah. And I'm not allowed to grab people anymore. Apparently there's a restraining order.
It was one time, John. It was one time.
And then HR just comes down on you like a house of, never mind.
And John's back. All right,
Yeah.
Laura.
And
all
this
yours.
is being recorded. I just want to remind you, John.
Thanks for having me today. I'm coming for to present you guys a supplement to our Title VI plan. As you guys know, we took on the 5310 program back in January of 2021, and we received an approval letter from FTA of our current Title VI plan, saying that it met requirements. However, they had suggestions in there for us now that we're monitoring subrecipients to include in our Title VI plan. So what I'm presenting to you guys is essentially a supplement to our current plan, just addressing subrecipient monitoring now that we are an FTA direct recipient. So
And this is to do with the FTA status in 5310, not the overall status of PPACG as the MPO. So just want to clarify, this is specific to what you're talking about, right?
yeah, this is what it affects,
Right.
is the 5310 project. So any questions for me? It is pretty simple. So I am looking for a motion to recommend this to the TAC, and then on to the board. So if anybody would entertain a motion today, that would be great. And this has been approved. I sent a draft of this to our Title VI officer with FTA. She reviewed it, had no comments on it, and said it looked great. So we have their thumbs up.
Okay, do we have a motion?
It was like so exciting.
Does anybody need a summary from Laura?
Yes. I can give a summary. I mean, it's pretty simple. The monitoring of subrecipients is essentially, we need to ensure that they are following their own Title VI plans and that their Title VI plans meet FTA requirements. So the way that we do that is we do a yearly essential assessment of their Title VI activities and their assessment of their LEP, limited English proficiency materials that they use in promotion of their services. We also have them do an annual certs and assurances, which is required by FTA. And so that just helps us kind of guide them in the right direction in implementing their Title VI plans, which is a requirement.
So Laura, Gail Sturter, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So are you doing this plan just on PPACG's behalf, or are you saying you're going to go and provide oversight to the city of Fountain and Mountain Metro?
No, this is only for the subrecipients for 5310. So the subrecipients of 5310 are currently they are in Vita and Silver Key.
And then Brian or Brandy, do either of you have any concerns about this oversight?
No.
Well, potential
I mean,
potential oversight should you get any of these funds?
Yeah, I'd defer to Brian because I'm not there yet.
Yeah, no concerns with this.
Well, that being the case, then I move to approve PPACG's Title VI plan as presented.
This is Brian. I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Brian, we have a motion, a second on the table. Any other discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, motion approves unanimously. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
All right, CDOT corner, or I should say you're in the hot corner. Any updates from you all?
Hi, this is Kathleen Collins. I don't have any major updates from HQ to report, just that the 70 Central project is making great strides and we're very pleased about that. I don't know if Wendy or anybody else from CDOT has any updates.
I don't have anything, Jeff. Michelle?
I don't have an update per se. Just recently, Danelle sent out an email discussing swapping funds, carbon reduction funds with STP Metro funds. And from our standpoint, local agency standpoint, we strongly discourage this swapping of funds for mainly because of contracting, because contracts now specify the type of funding. So every time we swap, we have to do a contract amendment. And our contracts office is, not to mention, our contracts office is very backed up. So if there's a really compelling reason that we should do it, then we're, all ears and we want to help award funds. But if there's not, then we strongly suggest that we don't.
Lachelle, I made the same recommendation to our management for the exact same reason. The contracting would just be too difficult to make it worthwhile. So I understand your point, and
Okay, thank you. CDOT. Who's doing the federal updates? Danelle?
Yes, we do have a standing agenda item. I have not seen any new NOFOs come out this month. So I don't have anything other than Safe Streets for All ends, or the application period ends in September. And if there's anything anyone else wants to talk about, if there's any grants or things you're applying for, but that's about it. Our website is up to date with that information though.
I will add that Andy, I'm sorry. But just Andy went to the DOLA thing, and it looks like that we are going to get money at the COG level to have a grant navigator paid for by DOLA. So that will, when that comes on board, that'll be of assistance. And all of the presentations at that DOLA conference are on the IIJA website. Off the PPACG website. I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting you.
Oh, no problem. I was going to mention the bridge investment program grant window is still open. There are 3 separate deadlines for planning. It actually ends on Monday, and the city will be submitting an application for that for the Fillmore Street bridges over Monument Creek and the UPR rail tracks. And then there are also other deadlines for bridge projects and large bridge projects, which right now we are not pursuing.
Gail, to confirm, all that bridge money is from bridges over 20 feet, right? And I think I asked CDOT that question too.
I believe that they're doing something differently with culverts in some other program. There's so many new names. I apologize. I don't remember them all, but there were a lot of stipulations in this one. And really nothing's really in the pipeline to do anything else but a planning grant at this point in time. We're hoping to be able to set it up to be competitive for at least the bridge project grants in the future. I would be interested, and I'll throw this out for the other member governments, if there's something that made sense to package something and prep something to go in the large bridge grant program, which has to be over $100 million. But to really be competitive, you have to do a lot of prep work in advance to go through and do so. But if there's something that makes sense for the city standpoint, one of the things we thought about was potentially taking a handful of different railroad bridges and like package those up so they're over 100,000, or taking like that Camp Creek corridor where we know everything is like systematically undersized in that area. But right now, again, nothing's just far enough in the pipeline to really be competitive. And you need to, you really looks like you're going to need to show immediate need. And going through it, as we're preparing this application, I mean, it's got to be in poor condition. So you're hoping that something is in that pipeline already. So it's kind of odd. We're just trying to position this as the projects that make sense at this point in time. But if anyone has any other ideas on that large project size, we'd be very interested in talking with you about it.
Thank you. Okay. let's move on. Danelle, you also have the next one, looks like.
I do. I get to talk a lot today. So we have for you today the draft of our congestion management process update. This is a document that is required as part of our long-range regional transportation plan update. We included the link here to the full document. The length was to a point where I didn't feel like it made sense to put it in the actual packet. And this is just informational at this point in time. It will eventually be available to the public for a 30-day comment period. But we have hired a consultant to help us with this CMP document. And they are doing some review and some content development for that at this time as well. So you'll see this multiple times in the future.
If I could add, Bill.
Yes, please.
So the thing about the CMP is the congestion management process. It's embedded in everything we do, the TIP and the long range plan. And again, it is a federal requirement. It is sort of the basis by which we do some of the performance measures of project selection, kind of moving forward. And in there, we'll have a discussion of sort of like what things are already sort of part of that CMP, right? And that'll be, what am I, unless I'm totally wrong, I'm getting my documents mixed up, but it's that sort of if it's part of that project application scoring.
Yes.
It's part of that public application scoring. And for those of you who have been
Yes.
around long enough, Tim, Victoria, Jason, Brandy, if I waited a week, but basically, I think when we guys went through the last long range transportation plan, right? The process was basically, hey, we're going to put together the scoring criteria. We're going to put the projects through it. And then whatever comes out at the end is what comes out at the end, and you have to live with it. And I think that was one of the things I heard loud and clear was you want to be able to make sure it makes sense. So you want to be able to run projects through it. So from that perspective, that's sort of where we're coming from when we say, this is the first information item. Next will be basically depending on your input to us that now that you've seen it, you want us to sort of run some projects through it and test drive it a little bit, kick the tires to make sure that you're comfortable with it. And then it would go through the public process. And once it finishes the public process, then it would go to the board for adoption. If you're comfortable with sort of how we did it and how we generated the maps, and again, how it all works, then we can shorten that process. So it's really up to you, that middle process of making sure that you're not signing off on a black box that's only going to, that doesn't make any real world sense. Once you're convinced and comfortable that yes, the process makes sense and it is based on numbers and it does have something that works for you, then we'll take it through the rest of the process. So that's sort of why it's sort of open-ended how we move forward from here. Because again, I think that's one thing I heard loud and clear when I first started was, hey, we had some real issues with how the process worked, and they kind of fell on deaf ears, and the priority of projects was run through that and then taken onto the board at the I don't say objection, but that might be the best word, objection of you here. So we want to make sure that we don't repeat the past and we come up with a process that's agreeable. I think the one thing, again, that I do want to stress is as we run through the CMP and we do the sort of the project selection, again, the federal regulations say that we have to do it. It doesn't say it's a set in stone process that comes out at the end, you have to stick to it. You can apply your technical knowledge and jurisdictional equity to move priorities around after it goes through it. So, but that's where we're at there. And again, we're not going to move this forward until you're all comfortable with it. So And that's why there's that sort of gap of, well, what's the next step? We don't know what the next step is. That's incumbent on you guys to tell us. If you're comfortable, then it would go out for public comment and then to the board. But not until you're comfortable, we're just going to hold it here at the TAC. Does that make sense?
Also, Danelle, I can't get the link on that to work. I can get the other links, but for some reason, the one
That
on
one
the
is not
2022,
working?
yeah, I don't know if it's working for anyone else. Okay.
Okay, I will fix that. Okay.
Eddie, I'm missing link.
John's back.
Yeah, well, that is, so if you can't open the link, then you're definitely not comfortable with it yet. So,
Definitely not.
yeah, it's a little bit of a read, but we tried to make it easy, and compared to other regions that we looked at, we tried to streamline it and make sure that it was the size that it needed to be to make sense. So hopefully when you do get it open, it'll be a quick read. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, continuing on the agenda. Faster than me. Okay, Danelle.
We also
Electrification.
have the transportation electrification plan draft. Again, there's a link in there. Hopefully this one actually works.
It
This
does.
one work?
This one works.
All right.
This one works. Okay. Good. You have seen this draft before. We brought it to you a couple of months ago. And not much has changed between then and now. There's been a little bit of language tweaking, a little bit of updating as the state proceeds with its NEVI plan, and just a couple of minor updates as the funding information has become available. At this point, again, we're bringing this as information only. Our plan is to take this to TAC and our board and open a public comment period for this as well before adoption. Do you have any questions? Would you like me to walk through the transportation electrification plan at all today?
It's impressive. I know we talked about this last time, but you guys did a good job.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, if no one has any issues with it, then it'll go to CAC and then the board as information, and then it'll go through a public
Yes.
comment period, and then it'll go through again in a month or two for adoption. And if anyone has any heartache with the word adoption, we can say acceptance. So
We can tweak things.
yeah.
That's all.
The bottom line is
Okay.
there's some jurisdictions philosophically that aren't going to do it, but there are some jurisdictions that do want to take advantage of the state and federal dollars, and this helps them do that. So we were very careful, and I say we, it was really Danelle and Casey who put it together and tried to craft it that, again, it's, if you're wanting to move forward with this stuff, this is the sort of thing that's going to be very helpful. And if it's something that your jurisdiction philosophically isn't for, it was carefully worded. And again, kudos to you for that, to not be prescriptive in any way, but merely a help-only document for those who are interested in doing so.
Great. All right, Danelle. Continue.
Okay, one more. We also have a memo here for the funding naming convention for the ETIP. So a couple of months ago, it was brought to our attention that some of our funding sources in our ETIP are quite confusing. They don't align well with, the information in the STIP or the IGAs. And so what we did was kind of take a look at those naming conventions and provide you with a spreadsheet of the current names in our ETIP, along with the STIP and what we've proposed as a naming convention. I will note that the list here is not, does not contain every single funding item in our ETIP currently. And part of that is because it includes all of our historic names from the past 2 or 3, maybe even 4 tips that were in there previously. But those can be marked as historic. So hopefully it can streamline things and be a little bit easier for you all to find your projects and align those with your IGAs and your STIP projects. Are there any questions? Do you have any additional recommendations? I did run this, of course, through Lachelle and through Paige and Wendy as well, but happy to make any tweaks or suggestions.
Sorry to be difficult today.
No, please.
Gail, certain. So the one observation I had on this, I actually would think it would be great to remove the word discretionary from the ETIP and just use whatever program name that falls under. In the case you have on here, it'd be build. We're going to be submitting a TIP amendment to include a Chrissy grant. We're hopeful to be successful to bring other grants into the region. And we just think it might be easier to keep it straight which program that's coming from.
Okay, absolutely.
Before we say absolutely, looking at the CDOT folks, are there any funding sources that that is basically exactly the same, but some of it is formula driven and some of it's discretionary, and we need to have that as a descriptor? Or if there's no issues, then we'll happily remove the word discretionary.
Do you have any comment first, Michelle? No. The discretionary funds are in our pool as discretionary funds. So if we had a Chrissy grant that came to the department, it depends on what color of money that is that's transferred to us. So it could go in into the RPP pool, and it could be programmed as whatever it is. So it's all specific to what happens, and there's no one size fits all. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, so if we can move the word discretionary without it becoming confusing with another one, we'll remove it. But if it is a descriptor in the CDOT system and there's like discretionary RPP versus district RPP, if we remove the descriptor, then it both becomes RPP and becomes confusing. So provided that it fits
It
within the
wouldn't be
CDOT.
RPP and our side of the deal, it
Right.
would still be discretionary.
All right, so if we can do it without it confusing the thing, we're happy to remove it, but I think it's beyond our control is my point.
And I have no way of controlling any of that either, and neither do the folks up north. It just depends on what types of federal money make up those allocations.
But if we can remove it, we will, right? I think is what we're saying.
So in our case, the projects that we have in our ETIP now that are marked as federal discretionary, the STIP funding program is discretionary funding, but we also have a build grant. We have 2 funding labels in our ETIP that should be combined as one. They shouldn't be 2 separate.
So it sounds like we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can't change the STIP, obviously, but we can change our system.
Yep.
I would also just go through spelling on some of these words and make sure they're correct, because
Okay.
It's distracting me. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll try to get Grammarly and spell and use it to correct it.
Okay, so what I was asked by my engineers was to make sure that our IGAs are matching what the STIP is saying. So in this proposal, the STIP says one thing and the proposed ETIP is still going to say something different. So if, as a compromise, maybe the way to do it is to use the STIP funding first and then put in parentheses in the ETIP behind the STIP funding, whatever it is you want to call it here, to make it more clear. Because if I don't do that, I'm back into the same box of my IGA funding does not match what's in the TIP. and my engineers will smack me around when I get back to work. You're looking at me like that's not a bad thing. But I recognize, we need to keep the STIP ones because that's what you all use. But if we have the proposed E-tip that has more description in parentheses behind it, then I think our engineers can match those two up. We can keep track of them here internally, and it hopefully should make everybody happy. Are you guys?
Victoria, can I ask, when you say keep the STIP fund, do you want the STIP funding program name or the STIP fund type? Because I believe no. The STIP funding abbreviation, because when I talked with Alyssa, that's what she was asking for, was the abbreviation, not necessarily the spelled out. Does it?
I'm going to ask my CDOT people for help on how that comes across in the contracts.
Well, just for instance, the build grant is made up of discretionary funds that came through the federal Chrissy grant process. It has region funds in it. It has RPP, it has surface treatment, it has bridge, it has SCP Metro.
Right.
So all of that make the build grant. So the build grant isn't really a color of money. It's a project.
Okay.
So what you're looking for is, I believe, is you're looking to be able to look in their tip to be able to say that we have $500,000 of RPP money, and it's made up of federal money and state money, so that you can match it back to what they would be putting into a contract for you, right?
Yes.
So in order to do that, I mean, we have those codes. I don't know how the MPP is MPP, and the carbon reduction now starts with the number 6. I don't know why, but it does. And we have a series of new funds that are coming down the road for the IIJA funding as those processes or competitive processes get awarded. So I don't know what to say. I mean, honestly, as far as how, because RPP or surface treatment could be NHPP or they could be STBG, and it depends on where you're putting it. So if you're looking for the color of money versus the program could have more than one color of money.
So what they're looking for is to be able to know when their deadlines are for the various sources of money, and to have that be consistent in the tip as well as the STIP. I know Lachelle has an idea for me, so.
Well,
Unfortunately, I think we could probably do something retroactive after the contract is already signed, and then we can say, oh, look, there's the code, and then I can give that information to PPACG for the E-tip. I don't know how we would do it in advance, because even within CDOT, we have this great big spreadsheet called a crosswalk that we're supposed to look and just know what it is. And, so it's even like, we feel your pain too. So retroactively, after the contract is executed, we can do that. I don't know if it would be a tip amendment every time we did something like that, or if it can be something you can just add text to.
Okay, well, fortunately, this is an information item today, and I can take this back and share it with my engineers, and maybe we can chat about trying to find some way to make this work for.
Or Victoria, could you provide like a specific example of here's how your engineers interpret the data, here's how PPACG presents the data, here's the conflict that we're seeing?
It was under the MPP funding, and they didn't, we didn't even have a definition of what MPP was, and we couldn't find it anywhere. And so we didn't know what the deadline for the MPP was. And so that's where it all started, was with MPP funding.
and it also depends in some cases where sometimes you might be heavy in one color of money that has some flexibility. Like if we're dealing with RPP and let's say we spent too much down on our STBG funds, we might substitute NHPP funds into that process because, so, and we don't make those determinations.
But isn't that stuff on your project specific stuff? I mean, isn't that information available on your project specific stuff through the tip, through PPACG?
Well, because the PPACG tip
Just says-
definitions aren't the same as the STIP ones. The STIP one is what is in the IGA. And so they have trouble then matching those things up when they say to me, hey, what's in the tip for this? And I show them and they go, well, what the heck is that money? And I'm like, well, it's this money. And they're like, we don't have that money. And so we have to go through, this rigmarole that I'm trying to let them fish instead of feeding them.
So
That
I
makes
think what she's getting at is this. So when you talk about MPP money, that's your most flexible funding source here. So that could be made up of STBG funds,
sure.
or it could be made up of NHPP funds because it depends on where they go, what the use needs to be. That's where the crosswalk comes in to figure out how you're supposed to program those projects when we put them together into a contract. So, I mean, it's more than just, it's gotten to be quite, it used to even be worse. So, I mean, this is better. That's all I can tell you. But it's gotten to be kind of an interesting set of affairs now because we have deadlines on those funds. Where in the past, we didn't have such stringent deadlines.
Well, so Victoria, will this, the stuff that Danelle's proposed on the spreadsheet, will that be helpful? Because it seems like it's not where it's solving some sort of a problem, but not maybe the problem that you're actually bringing up.
That's my sense. And
Yeah.
that's why I want to have that conversation
Okay.
with the engineers. And I might just get you guys involved and maybe we all sit down and try and look at this and then try and figure out how.
And
how we
maybe
make it
loop
work.
Danelle in too.
Of course.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Okay.
think our concern on the MPO side is we don't want to create something that causes a lot of maintenance and a lot of, like you said, there's not necessarily one funding type that corresponds with every program. So going back and forth may cause a lot of work. I'm not really sure. I've seen the crosswalk that you guys have. I don't understand half of it. So
And just for your own information, it changes every time we have a new federal authorization.
right, right.
So all of the codes and all of the colors of money, depending on how Congress puts things together, changes everything. So we have to learn something new every single
Right.
time. And that's why they started putting it into this convoluted spreadsheet so that we could try to figure out how to go about doing it. Because even what I think is the way that it should be done necessarily is not the way that it gets budgeted either. So that could make other changes. So it's kind of involved. That's all I
Yeah.
can say.
I hear you. I know this is not an easy one and I'm, just trying to make it easy for my engineers to get what they need so they know when their deadlines are without me trying to look at one thing and looking at another and me not knowing what those deadlines for those are either. So what sounds like another group meeting is probably needed and we try and figure something out that works.
Okay.
So I have a question. So Lachelle, is this a piece of your crosswalk or is this a separate spreadsheet?
That's a separate spreadsheet.
So maybe before you put this out again, you have that you've developed the attached crosswalk. So is this your version of a crosswalk?
Yeah,
or
this is just our PPACG internal. We were trying to take our ETIP and at least put in the STIP funding program information so that fit aligned, but yeah.
Are you gonna call it a crosswalk or a spreadsheet? I don't want to steal the crosswalk because there's only one crosswalk.
You're right, you're right. Yes.
Okay,
I think we should call it Jedediah.
that's fine. Just not a crosswalk.
Thanks for helping me through this. It's not easy. Yeah. Good one.
Okay, thanks, Danelle. Okay, so now that Danelle has had her moment, now we get to go over to Will.
Hello, William Mast with PPACG. Last month, we brought before TAC the option of pursuing another one-year contract to secure a regional travel data service. The feedback we got was to go ahead and investigate if that's something that can be purchased through some other funding rather than local dollars. And so we looked at a couple of different programs and determined that STP funds are eligible for this purchase. Considering a couple of different services that are out there, we wanted to give you some information that we would recommend about $290,000 of STP funds for a single annual license would cover most of the advanced options through the different service providers that are out there to provide both single occupancy vehicle as well as commercial truck traffic data, congestion tools, most of the options that people would be looking for in a data service of this type. With that information, we'd like some direction from the TAC on how best to proceed. We've got a couple of different ways that this could be pursued, but would like to bring that before you to see if there's an option that you guys would like us to follow in pursuing STP funds for this purchase.
I have a quick question. Did that include bicycles? Because I know that.
It does not. We
cars
could
would-
not find a service that would provide bicycles for less than $300,000 annually.
So then, I guess for the people in the room, what's the gap between what we have now and what this would provide? What is the
For most of
additions?
them, it'd be about another $100,000.
Right, but so don't we pay, we don't pay 300,000 now, do we?
We did not have the same level of package. So now the cost was entirely burdened by Colorado Springs and El Paso County with $30,000 of data acquisition money put in. And the total bill was about $142,000 for an essentials tier with the streetlight service. In this case, we would open this up to RFP through Streetlight, NREX IQ, Waze, and a couple of other again, transportation service providers out there to see what they can come up with that would provide a higher level of product than what we currently have.
And what's that definition of higher level?
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, in this case, being able to include commercial and truck traffic in addition to all the SOV traffic. That's going to be the fine line that distinguishes most of those service packages.
Assuming that the commercial people don't have cell phones in their pocket, or how are they going to differentiate that?
Most of the commercial stuff is actually picked up through NREX using AVL as opposed to the personal cellular data. So what they've got is for all of your garbage trucks, UPS trucks, Amazon delivery trucks, because they're all tracked internally through AVL, they sell that back. So it's rather than trying to determine, is this person driving around for, business because they're a contractor, or are they driving around in a truck delivering something for like Amazon? They're able to go ahead and distinguish that based on the data that they're purchasing through those companies.
So then do you have that solely? So you have a bunch of numbers that may or may not include that. And then you have numbers that are independent of that. So would you subtract that out of your other numbers, or is it just to get commercial for whatever reason for truck routes?
Most of them, I think it's going to depend on, after the RFP, maybe who is selected, but most of them, when you are running your analysis, you've got the option to go ahead and do your personal vehicles or trucks and commercial, or if you wanted a combined to put them together. Right now, ours is combined. We have no way to distinguish it, right? So with the additional capabilities that are offered on most of the mid-tier packages that are out there on the market, you've got the ability to go ahead and distinguish those two types of travel.
Well, I don't need that because I only have 2 truck routes in Fountain, but do you guys need that?
Well, and Will, I do it. So I didn't realize it was an RFP process. I thought maybe we were going to sole source Streetlight again. It would be worth then having those other providers give us, I think, a demo of their software packages, if that's possible. I mean, we talked about Streetlight last time. I do believe in competition. I do think it'd be good for them to sharpen their pencil a little bit. I don't know what you guys think about having the other providers, if we are considering going out through the RFP process, having the providers have them do what Streetlight did. And here's your 10 minutes, walk us through your capabilities. I mean, as I consider myself a pretty heavy user for as small as our city is. Whoever's in there probably sees my name all the time. Sorry about that. But I wouldn't mind seeing a demo if we are considering switching providers.
So if we use the federal funding, we have to go out for RFP. And so I don't have an issue having them within the RFP process come and give us a demonstration, but I don't want to do it separately because we're already at risk of losing 2 months of data between the subscription because of the RFP process. And I'm right in the middle of my MTCP.
Well,
and I
we could
can't
probably
do that.
have Streetlight extended for like 2 months, or I'm sure they could. You know, I know they do annual licenses, but I'm sure we could ask Streetlight to give us 2 more months for a prorated rate.
I've asked Streetlight to do that.
Yeah.
It would be $23,700 to extend our existing contract for 2 months.
Which is something I have to go back and get funding
Right.
for.
Exactly.
Unless you want to kick in 10,000.
Well, I'm just concerned. I don't know. I obviously trust your GIS skill. I'm just, as a user of this, like everyone, you know, because you named 3 providers, I think.
Yes.
And let's say that INRIX EQ, I think you said.
INRIX IQ.
IQ. You said that makes more sense. You selected because of this, and this, and then we get in there and it's just, you know, it's like the whole debate between Microsoft Office and Google Docs, right? Like Google Docs is cheaper, but there's a learning curve, or it doesn't really have this feature, but yet it's cheaper. So everyone selected it. And I don't know. I really do like Streetlight. I'm open to something else, but if there's a way to understand what we're changing to.
Yeah, our understanding is once we do the RFP, I'm sorry, Tim. Once we go through the RFP, we will have members from our local jurisdictions. I know Colorado Springs and El Paso County obviously have interest in being on that selection process. PPACG, we're not in the business of selecting anything for our jurisdictions, right? We're just here to try and facilitate. So it really is going to be like, Dole, if you're interested in being on the RFP, somebody from Fountain wants to get in on this, anybody that is interested in being on the RFP, the more the merrier. And we'll define the selection criteria and then let people go ahead and kind of rank those offerings based on the proposals that we get in and the different features they offer within the budget that we've identified.
I mean, I think that we could just do like a random Zoom meeting and they could give us a quick demo. You know, those guys, those salesmen are virtual and pretty available. So I don't think we would need to delay things.
If during the RFP process, the
Mhm.
selection committee determines that in-person interviews, i.e. your Zoom sort of thing, is warranted, then we can do that. But we need to go through that
Well,
procurement
I would
process.
say in
and
the
we can make that part
RFP,
of it.
tell them to expect, they open up, the thing goes to advertisement on a Monday and then the following Wednesday, provide a virtual demonstration of your software and then send a link out and whoever else can attend. I mean, I don't know.
Absolutely. We can certainly facilitate that and get it scheduled. I think at this point, we just need to know how would you guys like us to proceed to secure that funding?
So my question is it worth twice as much money to have commercial traffic?
Yes.
And so what are you guys gonna do with it? Just
So, and I'd say it's not just the commercial traffic, right? So we've met on the proposal and the additional funding and what the benefits would be with this new package. And it's not just me, it was me, Todd, Will, and I believe Will spoke with the county before us. And the package that was being discussed is something that we've already been told we're one of the most users of Streetlight. And as Will pointed out, the benefits as much as we use it, I believe on the private side, it would have been like $1.2 million it's over $1 million of services that we would have been charged if we contracted it out.
Right.
So this by far is something that we support.
So
And
what
the
is
truck,
the difference? Like, I mean, just for everybody else's knowledge, because now you're using STP money and you're not using just your money. So what is the difference? What is the gap between the 140 to the 290 other than commercial traffic? Someone's got to know the answer to that.
Yeah, and again, it kind of depends on the service, but since we have the most, I think, familiarity with Streetlight in this room, the real big seller is, besides the commercial traffic, is it opens up some more of their data analysis tools. On the Streetlight side of things, it's congestion management tools. In some other instances like INRIX IQ, we could probably do the congestion, but you wouldn't be able to get the commercial traffic combined with it for the same cost. You'd have to kind of, because of how they every provider kind of works their big data license a little bit different. So you can kind of mix and match and it kind of builds out a different way. But on all of them, in addition to the commercial traffic, which is the one thing they all have in common, you are getting different tools. Some tools like with INREX or Waze would include maybe their advanced pricing is already included in the streetlight basic pricing. Some of the stuff that Streetlight, includes in the advanced pricing is going to be common to all of them. So it just depends on what we're looking at, but it isn't just the commercial traffic. A lot of it's going to be opening up some additional processing and tools on their side to go ahead and pull that big data and provide more information. The biggest one on Streetlight is going to be the congestion management tool set that they put out.
Can you give TAC members a side-by-side comparison of the differences?
Yes, I believe we sent something out last month. I'll double check and see if we can send out the same presentation that Streetlight provided, but they break down the 3 different licensing options. And then the third one is their highest tier. And that's, again, really the only difference there in the highest tiers is the bike ped, which we just did not have enough interest in or need on a regional scale to justify that step up in cost.
Another 140,000.
It was like another $100,000 basically for the bike ped. Yeah.
Did you mean the 3 companies or the 3 tiers of Streetlight?
The 3 tiers of streetlights.
But
That sounds.
Victoria,
there's
would
a
the,
question on that.
would the county find as much value in the commercial truck traffic and that stuff as well as City Colorado Springs, do you think?
Probably not. But we're willing to be regional players.
Yeah.
Having some of those congestion tools will help me through the major transportation corridor process. So I'm okay with that. And again, because we're looking at using some STP funding, the total cost for the county is going to go down and we're going to get more out of it. So
Well,
we're okay with that.
I do think it's important, Tim, what you said, that, we can look at this cost as this is a cost, or we can look at it from how much it's saving us. Because I know here locally in our little city, it saved us a bunch. We've been able to run all kinds of analysis that we normally would have had to outsource, that they can hop on, grab data, turning movement counts, and, in a matter of hours, rather than having to hire someone and then get a report and it takes 6 weeks. Right. So the perspective to remember is that how much it's also saving us. I think they have access to a tool that serves in this capacity, whether it is a different one at one point or not. So.
Can I interrupt? So look, this is an information item only, but we need direction. And so in our mind, Brandy, you kind of hit the nail on the head. When we did it last time, El Paso County and Colorado Springs were doing it anyway. So it was sort of a simple sort of thing. It was already selected, had already gone through that process. Now we're switching it over to it being a regional purchase that runs through the tip. So the second that we do that, first, you all have to be comfortable that this is a good use for these regional funds. And then once you've made that decision and once it gets into the tip, then we need to go through the procurement process, making sure that we've secured agreements with El Paso County and Colorado Springs to provide the match that's required.
Or anybody else who wants to pitch in.
And everybody else who wants to pitch in. Anybody who's a really big user, Dole. No.
Yeah. Really big.
Anyway.
I think we do less than 1%.
Yeah, but anyway, the bottom line is, right now, what we need is your direction. So on one extreme, this is a terrible idea. We don't want you to do it. I don't think I've heard that from this discussion. The next sort of thing up is run it through the normal process. PPACG put together an application, run it through the application with everything else, which is going to be the normal 110 days, I think.
11 weeks.
Huh? Yeah, 11 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Through the normal 11-week process to do it. You will definitely have the existing contract run out and you will have a data gap if we do that. The next option is if you all tell me, yes, we buy into this, this is all a good thing, take the money off the top. And again, this is information only. The action would be that we would prepare a tip amendment that we would bring back to you next month. And then you would say, take the money off, that we would put the tip amendment, we would do that. That would be the public process by which it gets into the document and you've made the decision to do that. And when I say off the top, what that means then is when we do the NOFO for all of the other funds. That money will already have been deducted for 2022. Then the super deluxe option would be you direct us to do this so that it reflects a purchase of over the next 3 years. So in my mind, there's sort of 4 things. What do you want to, what sort of direction do you want to give us? And if the direction is do nothing and find out some information and bring it back next month, that's sort of like your 5th option. But if you know what you want to do and you're all can come to the consensus, we as staff can move forward with it and bring you back something next month. You just have to tell us what it is.
I would love to see this money come off the top and not have to it go through the application process.
Okay, if people are good with that, then yes, we can probably put together the SIP amendment and have that back before you guys next month. Yes, Wendy.
I don't think you can just make a tip amendment. I think it needs to be transferred. You can make a decision to take it off the top, but you're going to have to transfer it to your CPG. That's what I think.
Is that how we did it for the travel demand survey when we took that off the top?
With CBG?
That's the
Congestion.
consolidated planning grant. That's the money the MPO operates on.
How long does that take?
Yeah, does that change the timeline?
I don't know. We're still waiting on information for the freight plan, so I don't know. We'd have to.
And how long has that been going? 6 months, a year, 3 years?
I don't know. Kathleen, can you give us any input?
Well, actually, there is some good news. After much going back and forth with our procurement team, the step that's required to get the CPG scope of work contract amended has been finalized, and it's been submitted to our procurement folks, who will now adopt an amendment to that. And then after that, we will process the scope of work. And we plan on also extending the time for the termination of the scope of work to account for this delay. That is what's, once the procurement folks or the contracts folks get this process, Pikes Peak will be contacted for a signature. And then we'll move forward with processing the scope of work, but the scope of work for the freight study. We first needed to change the CPG scope of work contract first before we move forward with the freight study scope of work PO. It's taking a lot longer than I had hoped, but at least one clear step in the right direction has been made. And we're just waiting to hear from the contracts folks about that particular amendment.
Can we do a bifurcated call for projects? Do a very, very quick one for just this one, a NOFO for the rest of it at a later time, and get through it more quickly than that?
Yes, we can do it that way, if that's the direction that we're given as staff, but even then with that quick process to just address this one item, that doesn't change what Wendy's talking about. So unless the city of Colorado Springs or El Paso County end up being the sponsor, nothing's going to change. So I was under the impression that we could run it like a normal TIP project, but if it's got to move over to our consolidated planning grant, then.
Aaron, are you still on the call? Aaron Busto?
He's there. He's on mute, but he's there.
Do you have any input, Aaron?
Not at this time. I'm gonna have to just think about this for a little bit.
Yeah, it's a weird one, Aaron. Yeah.
Well, it's no different than when we did the update of the model per se, or when we did the funding that we jointly paid for the travel survey. The travel survey went into transferred from the region to headquarters project. And then the same thing when we did the model update here, it all transferred from the TIP back to the CPG. So since this is more similar to the modeling update, I would assume that it would make more sense to transfer the STP Metro funds back to the CPG to do that. And that way we wouldn't have to worry about contributions from other folks, because then that creates a whole nother set of circumstances to deal with from a CDOT perspective.
Right.
And you don't have that perspective
So
to deal
just-
with.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go
you.
ahead, no.
Just
fine.
out of curiosity, how did we run the Tri-County study? Because that is one where, again, the money came out of the tip and I thought PPACG,
Well, we did that, but it did take a while for us to get to that point.
yeah, just a couple of years. So,
I mean, it took us a long time to get that contract and all that issue ironed out to be able to move forward. So all I'm telling you is this, no matter what we decide to do, you're gonna have a gap, and you might be better off to renew what you have and work on this for next year.
well, again, we can't renew it as is unless Colorado Springs and El Paso County want to continue what they've done in the past
For 1 year?
for 1 year. But the second we open the box and we move it over to STP funding, then that federal process needs to be followed. And quite frankly, that doesn't matter if it's PPACG running that federal process or it's either one of you two. So again, the difference before was it was a very minimal sort of federal participation when we bought it last year. This year, if we decide to float over and say it's going to be a regional tip purchase, that checks the box and makes us go through those extra Fleming hoops.
And remind me, the local match was gonna be members dues if we did the tip.
If we go run through the tip, again, yeah, the local match has to come from somewhere. That's what we were asking El Paso County
And we
and
were in agreement with
25
that.
each, right?
Yeah,
25K
Yeah.
each.
that's right.
Let's take a 5-minute break. Is that okay, Jason?
Yes. If that's
Smoke
what we
'em if
need,
you got it.
that's what we need to do to handle it. No, they. All right, let's continue our conversation.
So what did we find out in those 5 minutes? Anything change?
Gail Sturtevant, City of Colorado Springs. So after some consultation, we are comfortable moving forward with extending the contract for additional year for the essentials package. And that gives us some time to work with the county to come up with the planning and application process to accompany that planning over the next year to fund it differently, potentially in the future.
Victoria Chavez, I in theory agree with that, but have to get people way above my head to agree to it. I think we'll be fine though.
So then, should we in reality include that in the call for projects when it comes and you guys come and get Wendy's process started?
I think when that call for projects comes out, we're gonna work together and figure out the best way to go forward.
Yeah, and I would say you may not see it in this upcoming call for projects. It would likely be then 1 or 2 times after, depending on how funding.
We might have to do the application.
Okay,
for
we'll
the
figure it
next
out.
year,
How
but we'll-
about that?
We
But
will coordinate.
we are planning on doing the 1-year essentials package extension for now.
Okay, so to be clear, and again, just for the public record, then the way that this had initially gone through is this wasn't something that PPACG directed or really went through the TAC. This was something that Colorado Springs and El Paso County agreed to purchase. And because it was a regional subscription, Streetlight had asked if we would more or less broker the deal. So Colorado Springs and El Paso County basically each paid for half, and it went through us so that it can cover the entire region. And then everybody kind of gets to benefit. So what we're being directed to do now is to try and continue with the existing contract along those same lines, correct? And if so, then what I'll do is get back in touch with Streetlight. We'll probably come to TAC next month, again, just like we did last year, to say we have $30,000 that we always budget for regional data collection, to see if there's support for us contributing the $30,000 towards the regional license, which is what we did last year to help ease the burden on Colorado Springs and El Paso County. And if so, then we'll go ahead and I'll work with Colorado Springs and El Paso County on trying to secure that and make sure our contract does not expire then.
Tim, did you have something?
Yeah, Will, was this congestion package going to be part of the CMP update?
You're asking about the tools? No, it was not. We were gonna probably take advantage of those tools if we had access to it. Yeah. Yes.
And it's definitely something GHG, in our GHG future as we're developing the long range plan, kind of, right?
Yes. It's something that we certainly saw potential for in a number of different ways. So besides the congestion management plan, also with GHG and trying to validate some of our modeling assumptions on congestion through some of the heavier corridors.
If I could just to be clear, the $30,000 that's in the UPWP for regional data collection, you know, in theory, as that goes through the process, that's a sort of a PPACG purchase. But I've historically had the policy of coming to you and saying, hey, we've got money, how do you want us to spend it, right? I don't want to buy something that you guys don't want me to buy or use. So when we say we'll bring it back next month, that would be more of a just sort of like, hey, are you cool with that sort of thing? So it's not a huge deal. In fact, just because there's folks not here on the call that have already left, we'll do it next month, but we could have even done it right now. It's not a huge thing directing that UPWP purchase because it's already in there and it's at my discretion basically. But again, I've had a policy of not doing things counter to what you want me to do. So we'll talk about it next month, but it'll be a very quick item. And like I said, just to be open and transparent, I'll do it when there's more heads to nod next month.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on. Item number 8, member entity announcements. Yes, Victoria.
So I do have a couple that I want to share with you. Right now, we have our local road safety plan out for public comment. Comments are going to be accepted through August 11th. And the website for that is EPC Safer, SAFHER roads, so 2 R's. So EPCsaferroads.com. If you'd like to read through that and provide us any comments, there is a website that you can read it on and then send an email through the website as well. We also have our 2045 major transportation corridors plan going, and we are in our first phase of public outreach for that. So if you go to 2045mtcp.com and you click on get involved, you can put comments on a map, you can put comments on a whiteboard, you can send us emails, tell us what you think, but we're happy to take any public comments anyone has.
All right, thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Are there any other announcements? All right, item 9, items for future TAC meetings.
No, I think as far as what we're working on, obviously, the long-range plan. My microphone's not on? Is that
That's
what you're trying to say? Okay. Sorry about that. For those of you scoring at home, Brian, the long-range plan needs to sort of start moving up in our consciousness. So the CMP is sort of that first domino that needs to fall. As Kathleen Collins had mentioned, hopefully we'll have everything in place to start the freight plan as well as the active transportation or bicycle pedestrian. If you're new to the field, it's an active transportation plan. If you've been doing it for a long time, it's just a plain old bike ped plan, right? So those are the sorts of things that, again, once we get approval from CDOT, that we'll need to move forward on. And that I think that bike ped plan, again, in theory, want to make sure that you're all comfortable with that. And I'm not sure if that's a separate meeting that we have, or some individual sort of emails back and forth. The last thing I want to do is have the jurisdictions feel like we are usurping their authority, that we're going to have this regional process that's going to list a whole bunch of bicycles and pedestrian projects that they have no interest in actually doing, right? So I want to make sure that we do this in such a way that's sensitive to the fact that we go out and have a regional network of bicycle and pedestrian plans that make sense and that all connect, but do so in such a way where the jurisdictions are comfortable that we're not necessarily promising anything that they would have to do, or again, in any way committing the jurisdictions to do any particular bicycle pedestrian project. It's just going to be an exercise to do that. So I want to make sure you're all comfortable with that before before we move forward, and make sure that we have your buy-in. And to the extent we change the process in a way to make sure that everyone's comfortable, we'll certainly do that. But that is something, again, that we'll need to do before the next long range plan. And again, Brian, you've got like 4 things on deck, but when you get to the regional long range transit plan and the specialized human services transit plan, I think we're ready on our end.
Okay. Sounds good.
Any questions on that? But it's going to sort of start, you'll see a lot more focus on long range plan stuff, all of the feeder plans, as I like to call it, again, bike ped, transit, freight, things start coming through here in the near future. Making sure that again, the project selection process is something that's cool with you all.
All right, thanks, John. All right, and with that, we will adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Harumph.
Thanks, everyone.
Harumph.
Yeah.
Harumph.
Harumph.
I didn't pick up on that. All right, thanks.